Have you ever found yourself in a repeated conflict situation? It might be a family member that really irks you, or someone at work that's annoying you, or in that situation, you just get really riled up and really tense. And sometimes it leads to explosions. Sometimes it leads to you just wanting to sulk away and not deal with the situation. How do we deal with it? How do we address that? How do we create a situation where we can have the confidence to be able to protect ourselves and those around us?
Welcome to Share.care, an all-inclusive community sharing experience, strength, and hope to create strong, healthy, and inspiring relationships. Share.care communities work toward every individual feeling safe, valued, and heard, free from the threat of danger, pain, or harm. Each episode, founder Damian Andrews explores the principles underpinning Share.care and invites expert special guests to share their knowledge so you can easily reap the benefits so many others experience. You hold the choice to create your future. Let it be with strong, healthy, and inspiring relationships.
Hello and welcome to a Pondering Life episode of the Share.care podcast. Our belief is that global peace starts at home. Feeling safe, valued, and heard gives you a foundation to confidently step out and make the world a happier and safer place for everyone. Because in today's world, it's in your own selfish best interest to help others. Now today, it's my great pleasure to be talking with Craig Gray, and we're talking about building the protector mentality. G'day, Craig. Great to see you again.
Great seeing you. Great being on your show. I appreciate you having me aboard again.
Yeah, no, it's wonderful to have a discussion as well. And we're having a pre-discussion before we hit record about the protector mentality and also how life impacts us. And you were mentioning how you have a bit of snow where you are at the moment, and I'm dealing with almost 40 degrees Celsius, complete polar opposites is what we're dealing
Polar opposite.
That's the way the world is at the moment. But I did want to. I was curious when we were heading into this show. I was because we talk about the protector mentality and where that came from your perspective. Because I look at it from my side of things, and I was remembering when I was young. I grew up in a small country town, and I remember we used to go to the local pub for on Saturday night. I think it was Saturday nights for a counter meal, or not a counter meal, a family meal. So we'd go out to the pub, and there'd be a group of people there. And this was back in the day when they had. I'm older than I look. We had a jukebox in their pub, and there was one time where there. So the jukebox would be playing in the dining room, and we'd all be having dinner and that. But I remember one time it was after dinner had finished, and we were hanging around, and there was a group of young people. I would imagine they would have been 18-ish because they were in the drinking section and drink. They didn't have any adults with them, and they were sitting near the jukebox. And it was because it was a wooden floor, it moved. And what they were doing is, as the music was playing, they were jumping up and down deliberately to make the record skip. And I remember getting really, really upset about that, going, how dare they? How can they do that? And, they're wrecking the records. And so I'm looking at that thinking, well, that's as we were talking about the protector mentality, it was just something that I remember always having. And I wondered if it was coming from my grandfather, because I know he was kind of like that. I won't get into that story at the moment, but I just was curious from your perspective, where did you first notice that protector mentality was in your life?
It was from my dad. My parents and my grandparents instilled those values into me, from the day I was born, and then some of the instructors that I've had along the way have helped to, I think, refine that. One in particular would be Jack Hoban. So Jack's a good friend of mine, a teacher, mentor of mine, and he was a Marine. He's actually one of the guys who helped to create the Marine Corps hand-to-hand combative system and the warrior ethics system that
Yeah.
they use in the Marine Corps today. And he had a mentor by the name of Dr. Robert Humphrey, who was a Marine in Iwo Jima. I think we talked about that in your podcast.
Yeah.
And so a lot of the terminology that I use now is a derivative of Humphrey's studies and Humphrey's terminology that he used for the State Department back in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. But the beginning of it was absolutely with my father, my mother, my grandparents. That was the beginning of it. So what I felt in my heart and what I witnessed and kind of was immersed in and began to mimic, I finally got better words for meeting Jack and Humphrey and that type of thing. Now I have a vernacular and actually a framework that I can articulate it better than I could.
Do you think we have an innate protector mentality just as part of being a person, being is that something we just have? I mean, I guess mothers have that intuitively themselves, but and it's not really talked about as much from a dad perspective that they have that. But do you think it's just something that we naturally have? Because I look at it, as I mentioned, my grandfather as well, and but both my grandfathers were very protective of the family. My dad very similar, and I think that's where similar to you, I got a lot of that from my dad of wanting to look after the family, looking after the community, which I think I said he got from his dad. Do you think that's just a natural thing that we've got and we don't really talk about it that much, but it is something naturally that we do?
It's absolutely something we're born in. It's in our DNA.
Yeah.
It's a survival mechanism for, if you want to get technical about it, it's a survival mechanism for our species,
Yeah.
and it's very much a survival mechanism for ourselves. And believe it or not, and it's hard to believe, but it's a little bit more inclined for others. And
Right.
sometimes I don't think we would believe that to be that
Mm.
way, but here's a little test for you and your folks out there listening to do. And I may have done this on the last podcast, so it would be redundant. Or maybe they didn't listen to our last
The
podcast.
audience-ship, it continues to grow, so there'll be new people listening anyway, so it's
I
fine.
like it. So, I teach a lot of defensive tactics and self-defense. And so people come to me oftentimes to learn how to protect themselves better.
Mm.
So folks out there, would you protect yourself if you had to?
Yeah, I
And the
would
answer,
think so. Yeah.
typically, yeah.
Yeah.
Typically, we all would, right? We breathe and we eat. That's a way of protecting ourselves, believe it or not, so we don't perish.
Correct.
Is there anyone in your life that you would put yourself at risk for?
Yeah, from my perspective, yeah, and I've been in that situation where I didn't think I would, being that protector, I didn't realize how much that was just innate and driven. An example for me was, and this is it's a minor thing, but was serious at the time. We were renovating the house outdoors and renovating the pool, and doing up all around that area. And the pool we had had a decking that actually cantilevered over the pool. So you had the pool here, and the decking went over the top, so you could actually swim under the decking.
Okay.
But when the pool was empty, if you fell off, and what happened was, so we've got the pool, but then the decking's up here, so it's a lot higher. Even though it was the shallow end of the pool,
Right.
it was a 2 meter drop. And my son, who I think was 3 or 4, he was sweeping on the decking, and as he turned around, he stepped back and fell. And yeah, I caught that I think I just missed him hitting the ground, but I know I was doing something, and I immediately, without thinking, I dropped what I was doing and bolted to go and grab him. He was fine. I don't know how he did that. He must have had some sort of, landing. Because he however he landed or whatever, he didn't have a mark on him at all, which is falling straight 2 meters onto concrete was pretty extreme. But yeah, just for me, that was I've never moved so fast in my life, never, and it wasn't a conscious thought, it just happened, and it was insane. I was holding this sound system, I dropped it, and I just bolted, and it was, and I linked that to that protector mentality, and I'm sure, all the people listening would be, if they found themselves in a situation like that, they would go to that protector mentality.
Absolutely. I mean, that's innate in us, especially obviously with our loved ones and the people that we really connect with on an intimate basis. But
Mm,
also, so there's self, and then there's others, which would be, people you know and love, maybe
mm,
are you're related to. But then there's all others, meaning
yeah.
people who are not like you. And you were in the military,
Mm,
so you were in a position where you had to protect people that you didn't even know. I
yeah.
mean, maybe you didn't. I don't know if you saw combat or not, but
Mm.
regardless, you signed the check to go off and really protect a
Well, you're protecting an
lifestyle and a
ideal,
mentality.
exactly, an ideal, yeah, a lifestyle
Right.
for other
Of
people that you don't know.
right. And police officers and firemen and so forth, and they all have to protect people that they don't know. They don't bust
Mm.
into the scene and go, "Oh, wait a minute, are you a Christian or a Buddhist, or are you are you this? Where do you come from? Do you come from
Yeah.
Israel? Or are you from
Let's get this
Australia?"
sorted out before I take another action, yeah.
Right. You save them or protect them, and then you sort out the details.
Yeah.
Um, so I think the issue comes when, you know, well, you're in conflict with somebody. How do you navigate this ethic of being a protector when you are in conflict with someone else?
Mm,
And you have to separate that person's value as a human being from their behaviors and their beliefs, and address those behaviors and beliefs if you need to, separately from the life value of the individual. Like if you're disciplining your child, or maybe you got to write someone up at work, or fire someone, or you're a police officer and you have to arrest someone. It's really challenging for us to separate that person's value as a human being from their behaviors. What we typically do is we kind of superimpose those two things over one another,
mm,
and giving you value by your actions, which there's a portion of it that's fine, but there is a separateness of that innate human value that you have, the life value that you have, that is separate from your beliefs and separate from your behaviors. And that's difficult to rectify and to articulate, right?
mm. Is that part
So
of,
I go ahead.
yeah, I was going to say from that perspective, because certainly in those moments, you're really in stressful moments. We start to move towards the primitive brain, fight, flight, or flee. So we're not really thinking emotionally. And part of that development, and I know, and you would know, the forces work a lot on that, where we develop. From that protector mentality, you're developing that skill to be in those moments and still be operating from a higher thought process. So rather than being just reactive and fight, flight, or flee, you're actually thinking about what's going on from that. Well, I know that's my experience from training, and what I'm in those situations when I've been in those situations. It's not just just react. It's thinking about the broader picture as well, and that's where I wonder from that perspective whether people, as we move towards that, whether we switch out of you know, making just reacting to thinking about that broader picture and going, okay, what's going on here? Assessing the situation a bit more, taking the time, because you would know from your own experience, putting distance between a situation, whether it's just taking that bit of calmness, taking a breath, can change the whole dynamic to how you react to a situation. So I just was thinking, I've forgotten where I'm going with that now. But just in that protector mentality, it's how do we make those decisions as to staying on the course of making those sound judgments in those moments. I guess that's where I was heading with that.
Yeah, going back to our original conversation of being mentored by our parents and our
Mm,
grandparents and so forth, it's if you are trained in a way to have clarity at what you're
mm,
protecting, because everybody, we were all born protectors, but some
yeah,
people end up protecting the wrong things because of stress, or
yeah,
or their worldview is skewed to the point to
mm,
where it's us and them, and I'm going to treat us with all these good morals and values and so forth. But if you're one of them, then no, it's, all bets are off, and I can do anything that I want and treat you miserably and so forth. Um,
Mm,
so to avoid doing that, you have to have, first and foremost, you start with the clarity of the ethic that life is precious, yours,
mm,
mine, all life, and I need to separate that value as a human being from your behavior. And if I need to manage that behavior, I need to do it most good, least harm for everybody to the best of my abilities.
yeah.
Then you need to have a skill set
Mm,
to have a better chance of being more moral.
yeah.
Because what happens under stress is you start to take shortcuts.
Yeah. Thanks for
You make
putting it
bad
more eloquently
decisions.
than I was fumbling around with.
So if you this is one of the I think benefits, not I think,
Mm,
this is one of the benefits of physical defensive tactics training.
yeah.
So it's the alpha and the omega, right? If you feel confident that you can protect yourself and take care of yourself in the face of potential violence,
Mm,
you tend to be more calm and more collected if it's done in the right way, right? Not you being a bigger thug, but
yeah.
you being a better protector.
Yes.
And yeah, and having that physical capacity helps you to maintain a better protector mindset.
Mm,
We call baseline, you're calm, cool, and collected. And then if you have the skills to verbally communicate more effectively and to keep your emotions under control through breathing and right visualization, and you have protocol of what to say, how to say it, even at a very general framework of it. You don't have to excuse
mm,
me, you don't have to be, the best orator out there, or do the next TED talk or anything, or be the
yeah.
best salesperson in the world. But you do have to have some basics in order to be more proficient at it, which will help you to navigate that conflict more effectively,
Mm,
and therefore you can feel more comfortable, be more confident, and make better decisions, and not feel, if you want to say, pressured to take those shortcuts that are going to make you less, how do you want to say, ethically sound.
yeah. It's interesting too from that perspective. I've always found, well, I shouldn't say I've always found, when I learnt this, it was pointed out to me. Because when you look at things like, say, corporate awards, because I worked in corporate a lot, but also have military background, and I didn't put the two and two together, but when I did find it was put two and two together, it really stood out. In corporate, you're rewarded generally for what you've done, um,
Mm,
and even if it's to the detriment of other people. But when you look at all the military medals, all of them are about you sacrificing yourself to help others.
right.
And that's a really, really different mentality to reward. It's interesting how that military works. And I remember reading about, and it's coming back to this protecting the sanctity of life, and how different. And certainly that's come up a lot, in discussion with the war in Ukraine at the moment. How Russia's
Yeah.
just throwing people in there, as they call it, the meat grinder, just trying to make small gains. Well, that's all they're achieving is small gains. But I remember reading about and watching some documentaries on some of the battles in World War II, and one in particular, I think it was in the Pacific. Excuse me if I got the battle wrong, but there was one where the US sent the fighter planes out, and they knew that they only had just enough fuel to get back. So it wasn't a suicide mission, but it was very
Well, that's when
risky.
we bombed Tokyo. That was after Pearl
Yeah.
Harbor happened, and we wanted to go and retaliate. So they knew they could get there, but they didn't. They couldn't get back.
Yeah, no, I think that might have been, that's another one, but the one I'm thinking of was what happened was when they were coming back, it got to nighttime,
Okay.
and what happened was the admiral of the fleet, rather than, he put the entire fleet at risk because it was night, he lit up and said so that the pilots could find their way, because this is before radar and all that kind of stuff that we have
Sure.
now. He got the entire fleet to turn on all their lights so the pilots could find their way back.
Yeah.
And so putting the entire fleet at risk, to save a few pilots. And when you look at that from military, and you know as well as I've done, I've studied a lot of martial arts. A lot of that comes from the tradition in that is the warrior mentality, where it's about sacrifice and sacrifice other people. But I remember, in when I was first in basic training, they said, you're not here to die for your country, which is the opposite of what a lot of warriors are taught. You die for your country. We were taught you don't die for your country, you make the other person die for theirs. And it's a different mentality, which I wonder about that, because I said I still study a lot of martial arts, and I look at the tradition and I wonder, I go, was it that shift that we have, that we actually embraced that protector mentality, that we looked after people, and that is a more civilized view to have, to care for other people, even at your own sacrifice. And we were talking about that, whether that's a driving force that actually it compels people to more want to be with that I was going to say that side, but I don't want to make it sides, to be with that philosophy where you actually will go to the lengths of saving people rather than just sacrificing people, and that draws more people to you. So I think about that a lot.
Yeah, I mean, there was a while back, I was asked to be a keynote speaker for the Michigan Counseling Association.
Yeah.
Which is interesting because I'm not a counselor, and and most of those people in the room had PhDs in psychology and all that, which they have higher education than I do. They do different things, but they're very intrigued by some of my work. And so they ended up hiring me a few times to come out and do keynotes. One of the keynotes that I was doing was on leadership, and that became what became the centerpiece of my whole presentation was this. I looked for a word cloud, so it has the word in the middle and all the associative words around it.
Yeah.
And I was looking for some very particular words in that word cloud, and I could not find it. So what I was looking for was the word leadership in the middle, and then somewhere in there the word protector.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I couldn't find a word cloud that had the word protector in it. So that became my whole keynote, which is this. You can be a manager and not protect those people underneath you. You can manage them. But if you want to be a true leader, you have to be a protector. People who are following you have to feel as if they are protected and respected by the people who they are following. So the same holds true when you're holding up the ideology of a country or a community or a company. If you don't feel like you are being respected and protected by that larger community, you're not going to have loyalty to them unless you're forced, and that doesn't go that far, right? You can force somebody, but as soon as they turn their back or you get the opportunity to, put the boot to them, guess what? Your loyalty's gone. So absolutely, this ideology of being a protector permeates our modern society, if you want to say it, because as we continue to expand globally to a global tribe, so to speak, we have to continue to see our differences, but we also have to continue to recognize our basic similarities.
Yeah.
And that two is we're human beings, and number two is we're protectors. We just have to make sure that we're all aligned at protecting the same thing, which is that of the sanctity of life, and be able to recognize but diffuse all of our differences. Differences are great until you start making decisions to harm and disrespect other people on behalf of your relative values.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I love what you said there about being a protector. And from that perspective, as a leader, that's a requirement, and that really does stand out. In today, when you're looking at the war in Ukraine, where you go, even though Ukraine, mandated that the people be, protectors and sign up. It's not, they didn't really have to force people to do that. People wanted to do that because whereas in Russia, as soon as they said, okay, we got conscription company, and it was a million people left the country.
Right. Yeah. They're like, screw that. I'm not on board for that.
And it was a different philosophy from the leadership perspective. It's like one is fighting for your values where, obviously they're protecting their land. But I also look at that too. I mean, how often do we do that? I know from my perspective, sometimes, where I've been tested on that. I remember I had an employee, and this employee was not performing well and progressively getting worse and worse. And several times I was like, I'm going to fire them. I've got to fire them. They're just not performing. And I'm not sure what it was, the trigger that came up, but it did come up. And the person said to me, they said they were suffering depression. And we got into a bit of story about that. I said, okay, tell me about it. And I got the background. I'll give you the detail of background. And then I said, okay, your job description now is to do the following. Every morning you wake up, you write out 5 things you're grateful for. You do 10 box breaths, which is, as you know, breathe in, hold,
Yep.
breathe out, hold. Do that 10 times, and you read 10 pages of an inspiring book, and you will report to me. Well, I said every day, but it was, I didn't, but I just checked in regularly. Didn't want to be too,
Right,
big
right.
brother watching. And it's
You
like,
will be better, or
yeah.
else.
So it's like, but you do this every day, and and I find with that sort of thing too, people don't do it every day, but they do start doing it because people respect what you inspect. And so I checked in every now and then, and in 2 weeks, this person completely changed. But it was a sacrifice on my behalf. I could have, go, oh, we're not performing, find someone else. Well, the reality is it takes more effort to find someone else. And
Yeah.
that was, and I said, because that's what I've been thinking about a lot about that. When you look at, again, World War II, why did the Japanese lose? They did have technically a superior military, but certainly at the beginning, but what wasn't superior is they sacrificed the life, and they sacrificed the life of all the experienced people, and so they didn't have that experience anymore. And this is where I think it's really, and now as we start to realize there's so much diversity in life, so much, and it's not physical strength that is the advantage. Since we moved to the Industrial Revolution, these are my thoughts, we moved to where innovation creates the value, and innovation is thinking power, having that ability to think and move forward, and that's what's made a difference in giving us more diversity in what we can bring forward, because you don't have to be, the stereotypical, warrior that was, go back to Roman times, it was, someone that was a warrior, because there wasn't really that much innovation sort of happening at that time. Now we really need to have that broader context and value all life, as you were talking about, because all life can contribute to our society being better. So that's something I've been, thinking and looking at a lot, going, well, this is why, and it was always there, but it's starting to now, I think, be more recognized. I'm not sure if that's your experience, where people are, I know, like from the US military, I look at how much they go to the extent of protecting their people. I was listening to reports, and they're like, it's not acceptable to have one loss of life in the battle. They want to try and avoid that completely as much as possible. And that's a key focus, which is a different dynamic than what we've had throughout history.
Well, here's an interesting quote. I'm assuming it's correct. So let's
Don't let the truth
fingers
get in the way of a
crossed.
good
Nowadays,
story.
you never know. You never know with the internet nowadays. But this comes from Sitting Bull, who was a Native American,
Mm,
um, and he said this about his warriors. He said,
mm,
"Warriors are not what you think of as warriors. The
mm,
warrior is not someone who fights because no one has the right to take another life. A warrior is, for us, is one who sacrifices himself for the good of others. His task is to take care of the elderly, the defenseless, and those who cannot provide for themselves, and above all, the children, the future of our humanity." So, and if you look at the
mm.
kanji of warrior in definitely Japanese, and I believe in Chinese, I think it's the old style kanji.
Yeah,
If you look at the word or the kanji of warrior, what
yeah.
it is, it's a broken spear. It's not one who makes war, it's one who has the potential and capacity to prevent war.
Ah,
prevent loss of life. Now,
interesting.
sometimes, as a warrior yourself, sometimes, in order to protect a life, I need to take a life.
Yeah.
But it's the last resort, and it's only because, you've exhausted all other options, but you have the capacity to do that.
Mm.
And not because you revel in the death, but because you're focused in on the greater good and the greater life. There was an interview that was done from Time Life magazine way back during World War II, during D-Day, and the interviewer was interviewing a soldier who was on the front line during D-Day, and just paraphrased, but they said, how did you survive? You're watching all your friends and comrades getting shot and killed and blown up, and you had to take life. What kind of drove you, and why didn't you go crazy or just not survive it? And he said, well, when I was staring down the barrel of my gun, I was thinking about the people that I was protecting and saving, not the people that I was killing. So the
Mm.
idea of being a protector is understanding that you do have to embrace that idea of violence inside of us and around us. But the idea is, how can you try to prevent those things from happening? Even if you have to embrace it yourself, are you doing it for the right reason? Just like a surgeon, right? A surgeon uses a knife and they have to cut people open, but they do it to protect them, to save them, not to hurt and kill them.
Yeah, that's interesting that you mentioned that. I didn't know that about the warrior mentality. What from that perspective of Sitting Bull, that description was fantastic. And the symbol of the broken spear, someone who has the capacity to, but wants to avoid. And it's interesting now that these pieces are coming. For me, it's interesting that this is coming together, because I'm Polish, Ukraine, and Russian up, so I'm and I think I'm integrated. So
Me
I
too.
can.
My ethnicity is very much Ukrainian. My great grandmother and grandfather came straight from the Ukraine
Wow.
to the United States, so I've got a huge portion of my DNA is also Ukrainian.
Yeah, wow. Because I had that, well, the Polish side of things, I had the Catholic upbringing, so I had a lot of that, yeah. And the one thing that I was fascinated on that warrior side of things, and it wasn't until later in life that it was explained to me, was I always found it fascinating where there was a quote about the meek shall inherit the earth, which to me didn't seem to make sense, because the Bible is certainly not about being meek. It was very much about,
True.
well, it was, what is the other quotes about you come back and their robes will be draped in what? They'd be draped in blood. It was very, and so you had this quote about the meek shall inherit the earth. And to me, I found that so juxtaposed and I never understood it. I go, what does this mean? And then it was explained to me later, that meek in the original Greek words was not a weak person. It
Right.
was actually someone who was a warrior, someone that had capacity, but basically they didn't draw their sword.
They
So
chose
that,
to take the peaceful path, even though they had the capacity
yeah,
to to do the damage.
and that's exactly right. So, and that's where it was, and that's a completely different picture of this strong, as you say, protector, how not using that for destructive purposes, but actually to ensure peace. And where there are elements, because in a normal situation, that an everyday situation, you don't need to do it. You're very capable in your martial arts ability. You're a black belt in Krav Maga, and certainly got many other skills in that space. When you go down to the supermarket or anything like that, you don't need to use that skill in everyday life. It's just when a circumstance does come up, you have the capacity to respond in multiple different ways. And I said, for me, that's really fascinating what you talked about, Sitting Bull and the warrior with the broken spear, that is being the symbol of that warrior, the capacity to, but the principle is to avoid it unless absolutely necessary. And it's, for me, that's a little bit more of an awakening, going, this is something that's always been there. And maybe we've just lost sight of that, going, this is what a real warrior is. This is the purpose. It's not about attacking other people. It's about this protection of life, having the skill to protect life in the face of, a foe that might be not have those same principles.
And we know this innately, right? So I was
Mm.
telling you about Jack Hoban,
Yeah.
and Jack was captain of the Marine Corps and one of Humphrey's proteges. And when he was proposed to create or to help create the hand-to-hand combative system for the Marine Corps, which is called MCMAP, the Marine Corps
Mm.
Martial Arts Program, that's currently being used.
Mm.
Um, he was tasked not only with the physical attributes, him and I think 11 other guys, but also the ethical aspects of it. Because he's like,
Mm.
well, what's going to happen when you teach these young hard chargers how to
Yeah.
how to do hip throws and choke people out and smash their face and all this, after they go down to the local cantinas and have one, maybe two beers, and next thing hey, I want to try out these new moves that I learned. So
Yeah.
we need to instill in them this idea of being a protector and of this university or universal life value.
Mm.
So, the commandant of the Marine Corps at the time was like, saying, "So, Jack, what do you think? You're going to turn these guys into like granola crunching, tree hugging, hippie lover kinds, and are they going to be able to protect themselves and our country? Because
Mm.
their soldiers are going to be put into situations that they're up against, people that are willing to do anything to get their mission across, like terrorists and the
Mm.
engaging with the enemies and all this. So, I don't want them staring down the barrel of their weapon, thinking, well, that person's life is worth the same as my life, and they love their kids and family just like I
Mm.
do, and they, hesitation could cost them their lives and the lives of their
Yeah.
partners, and obviously the battles. So how is this going to work? So
Mm.
Jack thought about it, and he told him this story.
Mm.
So, do you guys have bears over in Australia?
No, but we do know what they are. We're not
But
that far removed.
you have other scary things that
We do.
so
Well, we're the
Australia.
home of scary things. We got all the
Yeah,
scary
seriously, right?
animals.
So
we, we got
I'll tell you
spiders this big, man.
right, and sharks.
Exactly. And we even if we
Um,
don't like our prime minister, we feed him to the sharks. that
well,
happened
the
to
story
one.
went like
He went
this:
for a
you're
swim and didn't
walking
come
through the
back.
woods,
Yeah.
and you see this killer grizzly bear.
Mm.
Are you afraid?
Mm.
And the answer is, of course, you're afraid. This killer grizzly bear is going to maul you and eat you for lunch.
Yeah.
So the next day, you go walking through the woods, and you see a bear and her two cubs.
Mm.
Are you more or less afraid?
Yeah. Exactly the same. Probably more so because the mother bear's a little bit more
Gonna do
aggressive.
what?
Yeah.
Why is she more aggressive?
Because she wants to protect her cubs.
She wants to protect.
Yeah.
So we know at a very intimate level inside of us that a protector is actually more dangerous
Yeah.
than a killer.
Yeah.
And so he told that story, and the commandant got it. He's like, I get it. I totally get it.
Yeah.
That it's easily confused. It's like I don't know. In the United States, they have this shirt that sometimes women will wear, and it says 49 or 51% angel, 49% bitch. Don't
Yeah,
press your luck.
Yes.
So we have this inclination to be protectors of others, but it's like 51%. And
Yeah.
there's a 49% inclination to just protect me and mine.
Yeah.
So it's not like this huge gap between, it's this tiny little gap between, but it's enough to perpetuate our species to have 7 billion people or whatever on the earth. If yes, there's still a lot of conflict and a lot of violence out there. Obviously we know that, but there's just a little bit more peace, a little bit more that we want to get along. And that little bit is enough to help us live in the societies that we do, get along with, people that we don't necessarily have the same ethnic backgrounds or beliefs that we do. I don't know about you, but I've been very fortunate to travel all around the world,
Mm,
and most people I know from a direct experience would give me the shirt off their back, and there's a small percentage of the people out there that, they'll take advantage of you or hurt you or rob you. But most of the people that I run into from every place that I've gone to, every ethnicity that I've ever ran into, other religions, other economic conditions, but
mm.
people who wanted to help.
Exactly. I mean, I know I've traveled to at least 44 countries. I actually, good thing now with photos that can show you where you've been. And when I've actually looked, I've gone, oh my God, I didn't realize how many I'd been
You
to.
got me beat by a lot. I don't know. I've not been to that many countries, but
But yeah, I said I can't and look, got on the Apple thing and it's like, these are all the countries I've been to. And wow, that's, and, and it was, but you're right, from my experience, and it was part of it too. We have an ignorance, where we because the stories generally are not about, oh, this place is great. There's always someone comes back and says, I haven't been to Mexico, but the stories that I've heard about Mexico is, oh, you get robbed there or you get dysentery. There's two things that happen in Mexico.
you get drunk and you
Both
get
could
drunk.
kill you.
Yeah, exactly, right.
One more unpleasant than the other. But and I would imagine it's because I've been to a lot of other places in the world where similar sort of thing. But when I've got there, it's the people are just wonderful. The people are wonderful, and yes, there are. I'm sure there is an element, and in most cases, I haven't experienced it. I've never been robbed or anything like that anywhere that I've gone. And I can't say that I've had a bad experience. The only bad experience I had was in Austria, where and it's probably a language thing because I needed to go to the bathroom. I need to find a bathroom, and there was a lingerie shop. So I went in and asked the lady where was the bathroom, and I think whatever I said, combined with being in a lingerie shop, she said, "Get out!" She's like, "Get out of here." So I'm not sure what I said and how that translated, but she seemed offended by whatever I had said and told me to get out.
That's funny.
But you're right. It's people. People naturally have this. A smile is a smile. They want to embrace. They want to enjoy. From what I've seen, people want to enjoy their life. They want their kids to enjoy. They want the good things for their kids. They want to connect with their family and friends, and that's what's driving a lot of that. They're not. If you really got to take some propaganda outside of that, and coming, being Ukraine as well, for having that background, I should say, and similar from my perspective, I know that the people there are, they're not interested in where the border is. They they just want to enjoy their life.
Right.
And I have that with friends too from Afghanistan, and I've been learning a
Mhm.
lot about that culture recently. And it's interesting how, because it has been ravaged for so long, but actually their culture is more about peace and harmony. And it was always a trading hub because people had to, travel through
Yeah.
Afghanistan to all the different countries. So they were actually a melting pot of all different cultures. So it's really fascinating to get to the true heart of how welcoming these people are, but that's not what's projected.
Right.
And it's when we look at that, people are just, I think, as you say, they have this natural protector mentality where they just want good things for the world.
Well, from a survival instinct, we really exacerbate the negative, right? Because
Mm.
we're afraid of it. So yeah, I call it the toothache theory or the toothache effect, right? You have 32 teeth in your mouth, but you only concentrate on the one that hurts, not the
Yes,
31 that don't hurt.
I love that analogy.
So
Yeah.
if you and the more eminent it is, the
Mm.
bigger it is in your psyche.
Yeah.
So that's why, look at all the headlines. Negative headlines way outsell positive headlines.
Mm.
It's we're naturally drawn. We have a proclivity to be drawn towards the negative, and
Mm.
I believe that's because of our survival instinct, right?
Yeah.
Uh, if we
How do
screw
you
up on the
balance that out? Like, because I know from your perspective, you're very focused and on the way forward. How do you balance out all that, the news and media and things like that?
a few different ways. One you described actually with the employee that you helped,
Mm.
but one way is understanding that is a mechanism inside of us, and it's just a natural inclination that we have for survival. So understanding that it's normal
Yeah.
but we just have to regulate it. And then you have to really be mindful of what you focus on.
Yeah.
So what happens is, we have our good old little
Yeah.
smartphones here,
Yeah.
and they're very powerful devices, but they are addictive.
Mm.
And when you're filling yourself with all this negativity all the time, and all the fear and all the bad things that are happening, you start to think that is everywhere and
Yeah.
all the time.
Yeah.
And in this case, shut the news off, shut your phone off,
Mm.
go and experience people in real life, and feel like you were having that session with your employee about, thinking about the things you're grateful for, thinking about the positive things. And that doesn't mean, and I know you don't mean it this way, but so for some of you listening out there, that doesn't mean look through rose-colored glasses and be naive about the ways of the world. It means focus in on the positive things, understand that there are bad things out there, there are negative things out there,
Mm.
but don't focus on them. Those things will find you on their own accord.
Yeah.
Focus on the things you're grateful for, focus on those positive things.
How do you do that?
And
Because, like, from a practical point of view, because I know from my side of things, you mentioned about the phones, and I made a conscious choice a number of years ago that I turned all alerts off my phone.
yep,
And so my phone, even when it rings, I don't know unless I'm looking at it, because I've turned the vibrations off and I turned the sound off. So even if it rings, I don't know. Unless I'm looking at it. And it's ironic how many times where something that's been important, I've actually happened to pull my phone out as the phone has been ringing for an important call. It's kind of interesting how that
that's kind
happens.
of interesting.
Yeah. But from that perspective, I don't have that. So I don't have all that. And I even took it a step further as I canceled my Facebook account, because I just thought it just got too, that platform got too negative for my liking, and it was like, I'm filtering that out completely. I don't want that in my life. It's just not, for me, it's not right, and that's my choice.
Yep.
But I was wondering, from your perspective, what sort of things have you done to control that filter, or to stay focused?
Absolutely, those very same things too, right? I do have a Facebook account, but it's not on my phone. I only interact with it usually for my organizational stuff. I barely ever do any like personal posting and that type of thing. I use a third party app to actually put updates on it, so
Yeah.
it kind of gives me another layer of separation.
Yeah.
So, I mean, some people, let me rephrase. You have to also be very specific on what is necessary
Mm.
and what is not. For instance, a lot of people think, "Oh no, I need this to talk to people or for my business," and most of it is bullshit. Most of it is not even real. It's
Yeah.
it is an addiction, and it's adult entertainment. And I don't mean adult like pornography, but
Yeah. Yeah.
adult entertainment meaning news is can be good if it's useful,
Mm.
but a lot of the news is not really applicable to you or I.
Mm.
It's just going to get you lathered up, and meaning, and also because news often is so negative, you start to believe everything is negative out there.
Yeah.
And then next thing you know, you've developed a habit of negativity, and that permeates everything else in your life. And I love what you had your employee do. I think starting off in the morning with some good positive
Mm.
affirmations and a good workout, along with the breathing exercises, whether you do box breathing or whatever type of breathing you want to do, but some deep breathing exercises with some physical activities and good mental dialogue of affirmations to put you to kind of program your day to
Mm.
be off in the positive way. One of the things that we do for like a conflict management strategies is this: conflict is an opportunity.
Mm.
Right? You can look at it. If nobody wants directly, typically nobody wants conflict, right? They want to
Yeah.
get their way. They want to go through life without any
Mm.
static. But if you view conflict as an opportunity for two things, number one, obviously it's an opportunity for you to get personal development, right?
Yeah.
We really
Yeah.
grow during
Yeah.
conflict. And if you think about it, there's always something good comes out of it.
Mm.
if you look for it. Now, sometimes I think we feel guilty because we don't want, because then it's almost like we are saying that it was good for that conflict or that violence to happen.
Yeah.
But for instance, let's take something that's hot topic, right? If it wasn't for the Holocaust, Israel probably wouldn't have become a state.
Mm. Yeah.
And if it would have, probably not for a much longer time.
Yeah.
So now, does that mean that we thought that it was good to have the Holocaust to get the state of Israel? No, that's not what we're saying at all. It was a tragedy of the Holocaust was an absolute tragedy for humanity. However, good things still came out of it.
Yeah.
Now, it doesn't mean that you'd want to do it again, or it doesn't, so you have to kind of stop that way of thinking. What you have to do is, well, this is the situation that happened. Now, what good could come out of it? So that's one thing. Same thing in your life. I don't know about you, but some of the darkest times of my life have provided the brightest, sunshine later. Right.
Yeah.
The biggest personal development through a bunch of pain and conflict and sweat and tears.
I took
and
an
loss
attitude, and someone said it to me once. It said, because you have that experience and going, when someone says, "Oh, you're going to look back and laugh," and someone said, "Well, why wait? Why don't you laugh now?" And I was like, "That's a great idea," and I took
That's a
that
great
on
idea. Why are you waiting to be happy? Why don't you just be happy now? We typically are happy when we get our way, but that's very deceptive.
Yeah. We'll get into that in a minute.
So that's one thing. So there's the personal development or the development aspect of a conflict, that if you're looking for the positive things to come out of it. Here's the other thing, more practical in the moment. If you are in a situation where there's conflict and you are not part of the problem, meaning your baseline, you're calm, cool, collected, you're doing the right things, you're most good, least harm, the other individual or groups of individuals will tell you exactly how the situation needs to be managed.
Yeah.
You may not like it, but you're getting data.
Yeah.
But you have to be baseline. You have to be taking the moral high ground. You have to be the one who has the skills. Otherwise, you're going to get sucked into being part of the problem, and you will never see the solutions unless, you get your way.
Yeah.
So the more dialed in you are on your ethic, the more dialed in you are on staying calm, cool, and collected. And if you have the skills to be able to do that, it's going to be more easily obtained by you. But the other individual or the group will tell you how they need to be managed, right? But if you're part of that problem, you'll just add gas to the fire.
Yeah, it's interesting
or
that
petrol to the fire.
Yeah, thank you. Translating for us down under here, g'day, mate.
Right.
And it's aluminium, not aluminum.
Oh, right. That's right. In the laboratory.
Get it right, will you? No. I love what you're saying there about you talking about personal development, and it's interesting that you said that, because I help a lot of people in legal matters with family disputes, both men and women, particularly to do with children and children being taken by the other parent. And it's interesting, and I've said that, and I've repeatedly said to them, in the court process, it's more about a process of your own personal development. This is a high stress situation, a very difficult situation, and your need, or not need, is not the right word, but this desire to go to this level of conflict and create conflict and attack the other person is not going to serve you well, and it doesn't. And there's a lot of people that go, "Oh, the system's wrong," and doesn't. And I'm looking at going, "No, well, the system actually works really well if you the rule." And it's interesting because I'm not sure what the legislation is in America, but in Australia, the Family Law Act and the Domestic Violence Act, the two pieces of legislation are very clear on what are the requirements. Certainly from a family law perspective, as far as spend time with the children, it specifically states what they're looking at. And a majority of affidavits that I've read prepared by lawyers don't address that. They actually
Mm.
are all about attacking the other person and how they're shit, and this person did this and did that, and a lot of it's historical, so it's again not relevant. There's
Right.
a minor part that is, but a lot of what's put in there is not relevant. And so I'm saying to them, what you need to do is you need to shift away from this mentality. It's a personal development. You need to focus on what is the objective you're trying to achieve, and then what are the rules. And also too, it doesn't matter what the other person says, what the other lawyer says, what even your own lawyer says. There's one opinion that counts in this, and that's the judge's. Everyone else's opinion doesn't matter. If you get to the
Right.
point where
If they're
you're
making the final decision.
yeah, exactly. So you need to have that self-control to look at what's in front of you and going, is this relevant? Not about this person's because a lot of times the other person will personally attack well, they'll attack each other. One person will attack the other
Right.
person, going, "Oh, that shit, they did this, then that," and then the other person wants to get defensive about it. And I've had the good fortune of working with a couple of really good lawyers and barristers, and watching them work was fascinating because there's all this stuff coming in and they just went, not relevant, not relevant, not relevant. We only respond to this part, and we don't respond to any of this other stuff. We just say, I deny their version of events, and that's it. And because that was one of the other personal development things as well that I encourage people in this space is, you don't have to disprove what they say, which is,
Right.
you look at social media, someone says something, people are disproving it. Certainly in the legal system, the onus is on them to prove it, which is a difficult
Right.
task. As far as the Evidence Act goes, evidence to actually prove something is a high bar. It's not, oh, I said it and it's true. Like you get on social media,
Right.
it's like and people go, oh, it's like, and it's funny when you're getting people and they start to have those little wins and they go, oh, and you watch their personal development and realize, oh, and because it was funny with pretty much everyone that's had that first experience and then they've gone to the court presenting it this way, they've been nervous, and then they've presented it that way where they've just focused on these are things, and the judge rarely asks them a question. The judge understands. They get it. The other side is getting all this interrogation. What do you mean? What do you? And it's like, and they come out and they go, I said 5 words. And I said, do you get what you want? He said, yeah. I said, well, what did you learn? And what you're saying is dealing with conflict is this personal development thing is so important. It's really interesting to get people to understand that.
Well, the same thing holds true with our former conversation about, like social media and the news and all this. So you have to understand what's pertinent and what just doesn't matter.
Yeah.
So you got to be able to, it's like, that doesn't matter, doesn't matter, doesn't matter. Oh, there's something that is pertinent,
Yeah.
And a lot of people just have a hard time with kind of deciphering that. Same thing with conflict, right?
Yes.
So it's easy to get off base. So one of the first things that you need to be able to surmise is, well, what's the objective of this engagement?
Yeah.
And even before that, is this a fight worth fighting? Pick your battles. Not every engagement needs to happen, right? So if I'm aware of situations going on and I'm baseline,
yeah,
I have the ability when something is occurring, hopefully I can see it before it comes into fruition, and I can choose to avoid it if it's possible. Yeah. If I'm in it, I can escape it or disengage from it, or I can choose to fully engage it.
Yeah.
Now, sometimes you don't have that choice. Sometimes you're in the thick of it, but then you got to decide. Am I going to try to get out? What's my exit strategy? Or am I going to try to bear down and go through it? Then at what capacity are you going to, or do you need to do that once again? Because as you're talking with somebody, a lot of it, you're getting data, right? Yeah. So if I'm talking, I'm trying to get data back on what state are they in? Are they in a state to where they are going to want to cooperate? Yeah. Do they want to kind of get through this together? So are they objectionable? Are they going to be complacent? Are they going to, or are they just going to fight you the whole way? Right? Yeah. Are they just going to continue to whatever you say, it's no, and because they're just, they're fighting it? Or are they so determined to do whatever it is they want to do, they have no recourse, and they don't care about you. They're just they're going
Mm.
to try to bowl over you. So are they open? Are they closed? Are they determined? Are they open for, working together? Are they closed to that, or are they just determined to get whatever it is they want by any means possible? And obviously, hopefully, the laws will come to your aid on this. But we often throw circumstance and emotion into these situations, and people don't know how to decipher one from the other as far as what's pertinent versus just what's not needed.
Yeah, that's interesting what you said about, and I love it that you talked about what's your objective, because a lot of times I feel, and I'm wondering where from the side of you talk about the protector mentality, whether that gives you a different set of objectives, because in those conflict situations, people, I would say, go again to that primal thing of fight, flight, or flee, and that's their objectives. And if they're not fleeing or freezing, they're fighting without really thinking about what their objective is. And I'm just wondering from that side of things, as you from your experience, because I think that that objective sets a whole different tone to how you approach the situation. A friend of mine, he works in similar sort of field to you, and he has what he calls the 5 Ds. Well, there's a 6D for physical conflict, but that's different. But he, for but the first 5 Ds apply in both emotional, and the first one is distance. Where if there's a situation, you put some distance, whether it's take a breath or just step back a little bit, just put some distance. The other one is what he calls defense, but it's not defending against person. It's your
Right.
emotional defense. What are you doing to put yourself in a position where you can respond in a better way? And then discuss. So talk about it, listen, and discuss means listen, which is how often do we do that? We're already
Right.
And then diffuse, which is what can we do to diffuse? Again, listening is a good way of diffusing, and then distract is the fifth one, which is how do can we just change the topic, even, or what can you do to distract the situation from that side of things? I mean, it's interesting that because when you're talking about the objectives, what are the objectives? Is it your objective to have a fight? And a lot of people, I think many people, again, we're operating from that primal brain where they're not really consciously in those situations, and not consciously thinking about what is my objective here. So just from your experience, is that how have you helped people find in those situations to have a different objective rather than just reacting?
Yeah, a lot of times people go in with a specific objective, and then it changes quickly when there's static, when there's pushback, right?
Yeah,
So this happens in law enforcement a lot when we're dealing with law enforcement, right? So
yeah,
maybe I pull you over and I ask you for identification, and then you refuse to give it to me.
yeah,
Okay, so then what happens a lot? It's not uncommon for it to happen now it becomes a respect thing and an authority thing. So now
yeah.
now it's command presence because you need to respect my authority. So what was the objection? What was the objective in the first place?
Mm,
And can you kind of recalibrate with that? And if your objective is most good least harm for everybody,
yeah.
and you can better and clearly communicate that, you have a much better chance of influencing that situation and that person to do kind of what you're asking. Now, keep in mind, conflict communication skills isn't about you getting your way. It's
Yes.
not about saying the magic word and now everybody does your bidding. I wish that was the case. I'd be a millionaire. Um,
Yeah.
but it's really having this framework of
Mm,
I can be way more influential and
mm,
persuasive if what I'm asking for is most good least harm for both of us. Now
mm.
that sounds easy at first, but in some circumstances it's less easy.
Yeah.
Meaning, for instance, maybe that scenario where I pulled over an individual, I asked them for their identification, and they choose not to give it to me, and that becomes an argument, and everybody thinks they're a legal expert of why that's they can't do that or whatever, and rather than getting in that big debate,
Mm,
could take a different direction.
mm,
The direction might be, sir, ma'am, the reason why I stopped you in the first place is I noticed that you had a tail light out and it's unsafe, and I want you to get home safe to your family.
Mm.
So if you could just work with me today and, give me your ID, we'll get you on your way and everything will be
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah.
However, you got some good choices. If you give me your ID, we can get you back on the road, no problem. If you don't give me your ID, unfortunately, it is the law that I can ask you for your ID, and I'm going to have to issue another citation,
Yeah.
or I'm going to call back up, and it could get ugly, and I don't want that to happen. So could you just
Yeah.
work with me?
Yeah.
But there's the whole. We can get into the whole verbal side of it, but let's begin with the most good least harm ethical side of it. If you're
Mm.
doing the right things and you can articulate that, you're going to be more influential. If you're doing selfish things that only benefit you, or it's a power trip or an ego trip, you're going to have a lot harder time kind of influencing the person in the right way without using force in some
Yeah.
way, whether it's emotional, verbal, or physical force. So that's kind of the impetus of it. And it also brings back in the idea of the ethic of self and others, all others, and trying to be a good protector.
Yeah.
Now, does it always work? No, of course it doesn't always work, which brings us to our second point of having a good conflict communication strategy and being a good protector is about me being able to really identify with that life
Mm.
value, going for most good least harm, being able to communicate that clearly, and having a plan B if it starts going south.
Yeah.
It's not about me making you do what I want to do. It's I'm going to try to provide the best options as I can that are most good least harm for everybody, pointing to the value of everybody's life. And if you don't comply with that,
Mm.
then I better have a plan B. It's not about getting you to do what I want. It's about what am I going to do if that doesn't happen?
Yeah. It's
So
interesting. Yeah. But what you're saying there, because I found it really fascinating. I got to experience it some time ago, and because of some of the work that I've done, been in, obviously been in the military, worked with the police, that kind of thing. But I've been in situations. I also noticed recently how the training that you're doing with the police and that kind of thing, how that dynamic has changed. Like you say, it becomes more rather about asserting authority, it becomes more about having this discussion, understanding. And I got to experience that firsthand where the police were dealing, and it was in a situation where the person was drunk, and they, which doesn't help. But it was just fascinating. I was fascinated watching this. I just happened to be in the right place at the right time, with this person and the police. And I sat there, and I had a reason for being there as well. But it just something had blown up, and police needed to be called, and I was there, and but it was fascinating watching them. Where they spent probably 25 minutes just discussing with this person how it was best if this person would go, and they would do that, and the person eventually didn't and got removed.
right,
But I found it, that process, it wasn't, nowhere in there did they say, we're the police, you must. I mean, they didn't. Well, they did say that. I should say that it was obviously a police that are in uniform. So I don't know that they said it, but they didn't assert this authority going, you must do this or else, is what I'm getting at. It was a discussion of, look, what we need to do is, this is how we think we need to resolve this, and it's going to be better for everybody if we go down this path. And they were really discussing the situation and taking into account, and they took the time, which is really interesting. And part of that, we talk about distance. Part of that is giving that time to give space to
yep,
allow things to resolve a little bit. And I had a similar sort of thing with that objective. I personally had a situation with one client where they weren't paying the bill. And okay. And given I work in the legal space, and they had issues with other clients, with other of their customers, would be where major lawsuits, like we're talking $25 million lawsuits. That was
wow,
part of, they weren't small. It's a big company. But yeah, so, and they hadn't, the person, there was things that weren't done properly. And So, and they decided they weren't going to pay me. Now, I crafted. I thought, well, what I can do here is I can file a complaint and lodge it with the court, and go down that process and start that straight away. And so what I did is I drafted it up, but I used it as a marketing opportunity. I drafted this up and said, here it is. And I sent it to the CEO of the organization. This is a company that does billion-dollar projects. So I sent it to, the team, and included the CEO and the head of legal who I knew. And I sent them and said, look, here is the situation. I'm happy to discuss it. And we did. We had this discussion, and I ended up getting a resolution on that worked for everybody. And
Nice.
we had a couple of meetings, and we went through it, and we talked about it, and there was potentially miscommunication where I've misunderstood some things that they want, and I approach it from that perspective. I said, and maybe I did, maybe I didn't, but it's like, no, I'm right. I went, hang on a minute, I maybe I've misunderstood what you were wanting. And we came to a commercial resolution very quickly too. So it was only it was 2 meetings we had, where we reached an outcome that was good for everyone. Now, did I get paid 100% of what I sought? No, I didn't, but I got paid a lot. And I look at it and go, well, from that perspective, one, was it partly could I have clarified more? Could I have sort that out? I certainly got paid everything that I needed for costs and profit as well. So it wasn't like I was out of pocket from this.
Right.
And the other side of that is looking and go, well, if I had pursued this in court, looking at it from that side of things, that's going to drag on for this claim. It would have been 8-9 months at a minimum, where I've got to spend time focusing on that. What would have that done to the relationship? We've ended with a good relationship. It became a great marketing exercise, which I still joke with them about now, because they're still a client that do pay.
Nice. Nice. That means that overall it was a positive thing. You turn that confidence into an opportunity.
Yeah, and part of it was, okay, yeah, exactly. How did I turn it? And so I was looking at going, how can I make this one a marketing exercise? But also, two, approaching it from that listening perspective. I wanted to find out, maybe, because, and maybe I quote my mum a lot on these podcasts because she's great, but part of me is going, when you go your mum's, and then you start finding yourself quoting your parents, and go, oh my God, I'm quoting my parents.
Right. Yeah.
But my mum used to always say, it takes two to tango. So I'm looking at it from that perspective, going, what part am I contributing to this? How can I, and that's part of that diffuse step. How can I go, well, hang on a minute, what did I do? What can I learn from this? How can I help that? And that was a situation that I had in that, when you're talking about diffusing that and stepping back, that's a couple of practical examples that I've had, that hopefully help listeners just go, hey, let's just step back, and there's other opportunities if you look for it. And I think when you're talking about objectives, is that, from the protector mentality, because I know I've got that from share.care, we have the code, which is, a modern version of the Knight's Code from medieval times of, this is a higher set of principles, regardless of whether you can or, can't. This is a higher set of principles you'll hold yourself to. And so that's part of that, what drives me. So when I'm in those situations, I turn to those higher set of principles and going, well, what are my objectives? How am I going to, uphold these principles and move forward? And that becomes, in those moments, becomes where I set my objectives, rather than being, okay, I'm going to prove myself right. Well, that's not one of the principles within the code, is to prove yourself right. So that's immediately out the window. It's more about using your strength to help others. So if I'm feeling strong, how am I going to help others? What is this situation? And how am I going to listen? Is that, from your background of the protector mentality that you put forward, is that a similar sort of thing when you're setting objectives, or how do you stay focused on the objectives?
Absolutely. It goes back to that, most good least harm for everybody, in business capacity. It sounded like you were dialed in on that. So you try to diffuse your own needs and kind of recalibrate back to what's the best between this relationship for both of us.
Mm.
and not just forcing like, well, this is what you said and you didn't do it, so now you owe us money. And you kind of came in and reassessed everything, and making the commitment
Mm.
to yourself and to them to try to have the best outcome again. So again, most good lease time for everybody, because obviously something changed within that relationship
Mm.
and it needed to be reestablished. So you could have maybe won the battle, but you may have lost the war in the bigger picture and not had that client anymore. Or you may have come to the conclusion, you could have come to the conclusion, because of what the actions that they did after you guys started to negotiate again, that, hey, it's like, I've come to the conclusion that I don't want you as a client any
Yeah.
longer.
Correct. Yeah.
So, and if that was the case, your protocol would have been different, right? Then, it's like, until I know differently, I'm trying to maintain this relationship that we have together, because
Yeah.
I think that's good lease time for both of us to the best. But if you indicate that that's no longer the case anymore, maybe sometimes it's all right to sever those ties. It's all right to sometimes have to fire an employee because it's just
Mm.
not a good fit anymore.
Yeah,
And
and
then,
I've
hey,
had that
listen, this is
situation
what.
both with employees and with clients, where it's not negative thing. I haven't approached it that way, but we're not a fit anymore, and I don't want to be dealing with that behavior. I've separated the person from the behavior, and just said that that's not a behavior I want to associate with. So we're not going to deal with each other anymore, and left it at that. No ill will. Just I don't want that in my life.
Yeah, this just isn't a good fit any longer. And,
Mm.
more power to you. Good luck to you. But this is where we part ways.
Yeah.
And, the same thing with personal conflicts. You have to
Mm.
have a continuum of what are your deal breakers?
Yeah.
What are your deal breakers? So when we talk about dealing with conflict communications between people, usually nothing good comes out of people yelling at one another.
No, it doesn't.
You know,
I know from personal experience it doesn't work.
right? So no yelling, no insults,
Yeah.
no talking down to one another,
Mm.
no blatant intimidation or manipulation, and no threats of physical violence.
Yeah.
So, there's like those 5 rules. So if we're going to
Mm.
converse, well, those are the parameters, and if it goes outside of those parameters, then something else probably is going to happen.
Yeah.
We call it an act violation. So act violations with the verbal de-escalation strategies and negotiation strategies go like this: we can talk, but if one of these 3 things happening, words alone aren't going to solve the problem. So one of the A of the act is attack. There's an attack on person, right? So somebody's attacking me or somebody's attacking somebody else. Then I need to do something, right?
Yeah.
Now, that doesn't mean I chop sock him or anything, or tase him or shoot him. It means that words alone aren't going to figure out the problem, and I need to call for backup, or I need to intervene in some way, or I need to leave and evacuate. But something else needs to happen, because words alone aren't going to be doing the trick. So
Yeah.
that's the A. The C is there's continued noncompliance or continued arguing, right? So we keep going round and round, and we're just not getting anywhere. So
Yeah.
we need to intervene in a different way to make something happen. And then the final thing could be a task of greater importance comes up. So you're doing something, and then there's something happens that's more pertinent to that interaction, right? So you've got to go take care of that and maybe revisit what you were doing. But right
Mm.
now, I've got to table this to go on to the next thing. So like when you're talking with somebody one-on-one, and maybe there's potential for some type of conflict or violence, well, that's kind of those are the deal breakers of knowing that, well, I can't just keep saying stuff without doing anything, because it's not going to be solved. So I need to make sure that I'm paying attention to those details of that
Yeah.
conversation, that interaction. If you keep, and you can apply that to anything. You can apply that to a situation like you were talking about with the client, right?
Mm.
If you kept putting suggestions out there, and they just nope, 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 and not offering any further solutions or counterpoints, well, it's like, do you want to solve this or not?
Yeah.
Otherwise, we're going to have to take you to court. I don't want to do that. I
Mm.
would rather us figure this out.
Yeah.
And the same thing with an attack in that circumstance could be them financially or legally attacking you. It's like,
Yeah.
well, obviously you don't want to work this out because you just, subpoenaed me. So
Yeah.
that's, obviously I know where we're going now.
Yeah, and those things can be again still resolved and dealt with in a, because I said I do that with a lot of with people in respect of family matters in the family court, where they're in a situation where something's, it's not, and obviously there's a lot of emotion too with when you're dealing with kids, that it
Yes.
can be really emotional, and it's like, well, let's stay calm. How do we do this? How do we do this in a way that's going to get a result? And it's quite fascinating where, particularly with dads, I've found where they've been denied the children, they've stepped back and now they want more access. It's not that they haven't got access, but there's always been an adversarial thing, and then finally they file an affidavit and file an application with the court, but the affidavit is polite, not attacking the mother, and just stating what they want with the children. And every one of them has said the dynamic in our relationship changed immediately. All of a sudden, she was much nicer, much more cordial.
I bet.
In how she was, and it's just gone. It just changed the whole dynamic, and sometimes and that's again when you're talking about that protector side of things, having the ability and the skill to do that step if you need to do that step, and maybe filing a court application you could see as an attack, but it's an attack in a more measured way, not one of I'm attacking you personally. It's like this is the next step I need to take to resolve this situation
Right.
in the best, like you say, most good, least harm. I love that statement.
And in that circumstance, that may not be an attack at all, right?
Mm.
That
Step
just
in
may
resolution.
be, yeah, seriously. I mean, that may be the next step because you're not listening to and
Mm.
respecting what these boundaries are. So now I need to go to a higher authority to help to communicate that I'm serious about those, or that we're not resolving the situation at this level any longer, and we need to, take it to the next level.
Yeah,
So
because well, and that was the same thing with the client that I mentioned that as that example as well. That there wasn't. It got to a point where it wasn't going anywhere. So the next step was, what do I do? Do I file an illegal application, which I kind of didn't want to do because there was so much really good history there with a lot of the
right.
people, and it was just a new experience with a new person, and so I was open to maybe there was some misunderstandings there. But at the end of the day, it was like, okay, that's the next step. But rather than take it to the court, it was like, well, how can I use this in a different way that's going to be productive and thinking outside of the box? What about from the side of things, about diffusing things before they happen? And I'm drawing on from my experience just in life in general, because I rarely get into those, like I said, I had that situation, but with a client, but in most people I find, like you say, they don't want conflict. Even people that have that bravado generally don't want that kind of conflict. Um, is it because I find from my, and maybe I'm an Aussie and I've watched Crocodile Dundee, and there's a scene where he's walking through New York going g'day, g'day, g'day to everybody, um, and I kind of have that mentality when and I deliberately chose to do that, where in any situation where I was going in, I was going to go in with, an attitude of smiling. Essentially, I'm going in with I'm looking forward to meet you. How wonderful it is to meet you. That, and maybe it's the puppy dog principle. Whenever you meet, when you meet a dog's always, hey, how are you? All excited to see you. I have friends, people that walk past because I have a laneway that goes past the beach house where I am at the moment, and so many people walk past with the dogs. Well, the dogs are always coming up, going, "Hey, hey, g'day,
Right,
g'day, how
right.
are you?" Really, really happy to meet. And so I was wondering from that side of things, what if I did that? What if I had that attitude? And so I took that, and when I meet people, I was always excited to meet them. I had, and even in a situation where it seemed like there was someone was a bit standoffish, I was excited to meet them and shared that. What I found interesting was after a while, even when I wasn't coming in with that situation, I might have, been focused on something, people would turn to me and smile. And it was like there was no chance of conflict happening at all because it had been resolved beforehand because of how that behavior happens. Have you had that experience as well? Because I've been wondering about that, because I've literally noticed, I'm driving, and how sometimes you have that person that just won't let you in, and then it's like, I rarely have that happen. I'm driving along and I need to come in, and people come in, and I wave. I always give a wave when someone lets me in, and people come in, and I let them in. It's like, no problem, you can go in front, no issue. I'm not, and so I'm just wondering, is that, from a protector mentality perspective of what you've experienced, is that an approach that can help just not diffuse a situation, but just dissolve it so it doesn't even exist in the first place?
I have a story for you. It's called The House of a Thousand Mirrors. So it's an
Yeah.
old Zen story. So there's this dog, and he's climbing up the side of the mountain there, and he's getting a little hungry, and he thinks he smells some food in this temple. And he goes in the temple, and he looks around, and he's looking a little cranky. So he looks around, and there's all these mirrors. So he doesn't know they're mirrors.
Yeah.
So he's barking and barking, and the dogs that he's looking at are barking and barking and barking. And he snarls and they snarl. And he like jumps at him, and they jump at him. And he's like, holy cow, there's all these really angry dogs. I can't imagine. So he runs out of there, right? And he's thinking, man, that place was horrible. Look at all those angry dogs. They wanted to tear me apart in the shreds. They were really cranky, baring their teeth and barking at me all the time. So the next dog goes up there, and he's more like you, right?
Yeah.
He's going up there, and he's all happy. He's looking, and he's same thing. He's getting a little hungry, and he thinks he smells some food. And he goes in the temple, and he looks, and he's like, wow, all these dogs are happy to see me, right? And he's wagging his tail, and they're wagging their tail. And he kind of plays with them, and they play with him.
Yeah.
And so he leaves after he doesn't find any food, and he's like, man, that was a really cool place. So many really nice dogs.
Yeah.
So we often will get back what we project.
Yeah.
And I think there's that fear there inside of us that you have to act a certain way or be a certain way so people don't take advantage of you, or that you're vulnerable. So it goes back to some of the physical things that we were talking about. If I know I can take care of myself, and I'm strong, and I'm lethal, but I choose not to be.
Yeah.
I'm powerful, and I choose to use those powers for good. And I know I can take care of myself and protect myself and those people around me. That, hey, if you're having a bad day, brother, let me have a good day for you and help you to get in a better frame of mind, So I think if we can be constantly mindful that we are resilient and we can overcome anything that life throws at us. So I don't need any one person to be nice to me all the time. I like for them to be nice to me, but I'm going to be nice to you regardless. So there's a great saying that a North Dakota state trooper said. He said, we treat people like ladies and gentlemen, not because they always are, but because I always am.
Yeah.
So my perspective and my inner cool isn't dependent upon the other individual. So if you're nice to me, I think that's good. We all feel, a little kudos for that. But if you're not nice to me, I'm going to try not to let that affect me and then be mean to everybody else or reciprocate that anger and that grief.
Yeah, I love that you're going to be a gentleman regardless, or gentlewoman, whichever way you want to do it, but you're going to operate that. You're not going to allow someone else. I love that, because that reminds me of Wayne Dyer was a big influence in my life, and he talked about you have an inner candle flame, and no one can affect that candle flame unless you can. Nothing someone does can allow it to flicker. You've got to. It's your candle flame. If it flickers, it's because you're allowing that to happen. And I love that, what you're talking about from that perspective of your having that ability to take whatever happens, and it's not be reactive, but operate from, as you say, that protector mentality of, I'm going to be this person regardless of how you're behaving. That doesn't mean I'm going to accept that behavior. Right. You don't have to be, but you don't have to, jump down their throat or because what does it say? Don't lower yourself to their standard, because they'll beat you with experience.
Well, there's a lot of truth to it. I mean, and then it's not to say that we don't have bad days.
Yeah.
I was getting a little stressed before our meeting because, like I said, I was doing a video shoot today,
Mm.
and I left in plenty of time that it normally takes me to get home. But my usual 15-minute drive took almost an hour and a half because the weather's bad right now. And
Mm.
it wasn't when I went in this morning, it was fine. It was a little cold, but when I came out, my car was covered with snow and the roads are all slippery and people are driving slow. And it took me forever to get home. And I was a little nervous because, I mean, literally, I just got everything prepared like at the time of our meeting.
Yeah.
So I was getting a little cranky on the road. I had to kind of recalibrate my protector spirit there because I was getting a little road ragey.
How do
Like,
you
get out
do
of
that? I
my
mean,
back.
because I noticed similar sort of thing from my perspective, and I made it a conscious effort, and I find it really easy now. And I'm trying to remember how I did that. But when I'm driving, and if there's and I had that. I had to get to a board meeting on Wednesday night. I was, as I mentioned beforehand, I've recently just been appointed CEO of a radio station, but the board meeting was there, and I was 4 hours away. I had to come
Oh,
to the
gee.
city, pick someone up, and because where I was with a client that I was working, um, had some stuff going on. They were on site there with one of the projects. It's being a big infrastructure project that's happening here, and so it did that. But I took longer to do that and left about half an hour later than I had planned to leave. And I'm driving going, oh, and I'm starting to go, hang on a minute, it'll be fine. We'll get there. It'll work out. And I got to the city, picked up the person I needed to pick up. And then coming out of the city, and then there's a lot of traffic because it was a half an hour later in peak hour, and then I've got to drive
Yep.
down to this regional area, and I'm like, oh, okay, and I've got to drop the person off where they were being dropped off, and I'm thinking, okay, am I going to have time to do that? But it was just like, it'll work out, it'll be fine. And I literally got to the meeting 3 minutes before it started, so it worked out fine.
That worked out perfect.
And I didn't get stressed about it, and I just let it go and went, okay, it's going to be what it's going to be. But I was just wondering from your perspective, because I noticed that starting, but immediately, as soon as I noticed that starting to get stressed about the traffic or whatever, I just went, oh, it'll be all right. Don't worry. It'll be okay. And even if you're late, does it really matter? Was how I
Right.
approached it. So I was just wondering from that perspective, how do you, because you just had that same sort of experience. You're like, and I would have been really mad if you were late. No, just kidding. How did you, how do you deal with those situations, and how do you bring yourself back?
Well, you've got two types of grounding. You've got foundational grounding and you've got tactical grounding. So the foundational grounding is kind of how you live your life, and some of the habits that you develop over time, like some of the things that we've been talking about now, right? Getting enough sleep, eating properly, working out.
Yeah.
And you don't want to underestimate those things, right? If you're riding on 2 hours of sleep,
Yeah.
you're eating like crap, you're hungover, it's going to be harder to gain that foundational grounding. So at a foundational element, how are you living your life? How are you developing the habits of taking care of yourself mentally, emotionally, physically, and with your relationships and with your entire life? So that's first and foremost. Obviously, you can't do that
Yeah.
when you're in the middle of a traffic jam. Your habits were your habits, so you want to start on that now.
Yes.
But then in the moment, you got to understand that you're being triggered. So you gotta recognize in yourself that, oh, I'm starting to become a little agitated here. So know yourself a little bit and know those trigger points that you have and when they're getting triggered. Then what you'll notice when you hit those trigger points, whether it's conscious or unconscious, your breathing changes and what you start focusing on changes.
Yeah.
So you start painting a picture in your head of all these negative things, and then you just try to control those things more. And if they're out of your control, you start getting pissed, right?
Yeah.
Your breathing changes, your mental dialogue changes, your future pacing changes to all the bad and negative things. And then you get more and more agitated because there are things that probably are out of your control that you cannot change.
Mm,
So start to breathe differently, maybe do your box breathing,
mm,
start to future pace differently, start to prioritize differently. Is this really a fight worth fighting? It is what it
mm,
is. I probably should have left a little bit earlier. I didn't have any control over, or I left as early as I thought I should have. I'm not running late, but the situation has changed. And overall, nobody's shooting at me. I'm not blowing up. So, it'll be fine. And having faith that things will work out all right.
yeah.
Having faith that maybe
Mm,
they don't work out exactly how you were anticipating, but you can handle it. You can, adapt and overcome and improvise until you get what result that you need.
mm,
And I think there's a lot of that hesitation and fear of not getting your way. And we're very much of an instant gratification global society now because of all of our modern conveniences and all
mm.
that. So I think part of it, you just got to get over yourself and
I love that what you said about have faith that it's going to work out, because that was certainly my experience when I was driving. It's going to work out even if I'm not there on time. I can
right.
send a message because I've got the numbers of the board people there, that I'm going to be late. What's people, and I think we forget people are understanding as well. It's sort of the same sort of thing. If you got held up at traffic and you weren't here, it'd be like, yeah, no problem. It's okay. We can, these things happen. That's part of life. I found that really helpful to me early on in my corporate career, when I was managing projects and working in that situation and working directly with large clients. And I remember one particular thing, we were working on this. It was an 22-story high rise, and I was in charge of a large part of that. And and we had an issue. I promised I was going to deliver something, and something went up, and I couldn't deliver, and I was immediately on the phone to the superintendent of the client. I said, "Look, I said I was going to get this done by this date. This has happened. I can't do it by this date. I want you to know from me before you hear it from anyone else. And this is my plan to how to make that happen." And he was like, "Look, I really appreciate that you told," because this was critical for them. He goes, "I really appreciate that you told me that, and that's okay. We'll make it work." And it was interesting to have that proactive attitude of going, okay, let's find a solution. Solution orientated really does make a difference. It's amazing, how much if we switch to that, how much that has an impact. But having that faith that whatever the situation, it's going to work out. I love what you said there. That's I think that's probably where my head was at, and and it certainly served me a lot over the years. Now that you mentioned that, I hadn't really put those two together. The other note that I took here, which I think has really helped me a lot, is what, and I hadn't really thought about it in the context that you talked about, was the stresses in your life. And we probably don't think about it to that perspective. And I'm kind of witnessing that from a family point of view. Like I made a choice. I mean, I used to smoke on and off, and I stopped smoking a long time ago. So that's one stress that comes out of your body. I don't drink anymore either. I used to. I mean, when I was younger, I used to drink 2 bottles of vodka a day plus some Sambuca on top of that. That's you know. I joke that I drank all my share at once. That's why I don't drink anymore. But it was interesting
Right.
because yeah, I have poker nights with friends, and I wasn't aware. I actually didn't notice, but someone pointed out to me. They go, "Oh, you're not drinking either," and I was like, and it was the either part that stood out.
Yeah,
And I
yeah.
was like, I hadn't noticed there was a bunch of people there, friends of mine, that we'd been associating, and we used to drink ages ago, that they'd stopped drinking
That
as well.
don't
But
anymore.
yeah, and it's interesting how that all these different things, and I take time, and I've joked, jokingly, that I've turned into a Forrest Gump. I have down here, I have this really large lawn, and I bought myself a self-propelled lawnmower, not a ride-on, but a walk behind it, so I don't
Yeah.
have to push it. But so I go out there and I enjoy going up and down,
It's very
just
zen,
no earphones or anything like that,
Yep.
just with my
Just a,
thoughts. And I don't have to push it. It's easy because it drives itself. It's electric, so it's quiet.
yeah.
and I have that space. So, and what you said there about these stresses, I hadn't really put that into context of my overall life stress level is quite low because of all these factors. And maybe that's what gives me a capacity to, in those situations, to actually respond differently because I'm already starting from a low base. Is that, a reason? Because I'm thinking out loud here as I'm talking about this.
There's twofold on that. I think one, the way you do it, and what I sense is your personality and your skill set, that does help you.
Mm.
I think there's another way where someone could have low stressors in their life, but they don't have the capacity to go beyond that. So what happens is now it's almost like being lack of socialization, right? So they're
Yeah.
used to having their way and living in their own little non-stressed world. And then when any stress happens to them, it ramps up even quicker because they don't have the skills to
Yeah.
compensate for that.
Yeah.
So you got to find that balance point, and I think between the two, of still have the skill set and the perspective to handle the conflict, but you have the de-stressors to where you're starting at a lower, kind of a lower anxiety rate, or where you can maintain that balance. Where, for instance, when I was in my corporate days, I was a sales rep, and I ran around in my car a lot, and I
Yeah.
would drive a lot, and I would deal with the traffic and the rush hour and all that kind of stuff. Nowadays, for the past 15 plus years, I've been self-employed, and I can do my own thing, so I can avoid all the heavy traffic. So it stresses me out more when I'm in traffic because I'm used to avoiding it. Now I have the capacity
That's why I missed
to
COVID, because there was no traffic and it could drive
right,
around. It was so great.
right. So now I have the capacity to deal with that, but I also notice that it does stress me out more than it used to, because I was kind of inoculated
Yeah.
because I was used to doing it all the time. And now that I'm not used to doing it all the time, there's more stress. However, I do have the capacity to chill myself out. So does
Yeah.
that make sense?
Oh, 100%. Because and what I was thinking about while you were talking there was, because I look at myself now, and it's interesting. Close friends that have known me from a long time, or for a long time, have when we've had some discussions, I've pointed out, they go, you are such a different person today than you used to be. Because I remember one time I was working in the mines, and yeah, a bit of Dutch courage. You said I used to drink, and I, and yeah, I've been in the military as well and things like that, but there's always a bigger fish. So,
All right.
it doesn't matter how, but this is where, having these other skills, but it's like, I was there, and I remember, I don't know what it was, the trigger, but I let loose at this guy. And and he's just, and I've just started, whatever it's that. I've gone off and tap, and lost, because I used to, anger was a response for me generally.
Sure.
And then the guy's turned around and he's walked away. And as he's walked away, I was sober enough to look at how big this guy was. And I went,
He could have killed me.
ooh. But it's a similar sort of situation. I may have mentioned this before, but as some of the listeners will have heard, this is later, after I came back homeish to the area I grew up in, well, to the state I grew up in, but near the city. And I was helping a friend with their wedding, and I was out the front of the church and just guiding people and things like that. And there was a place for the bride to pull up and the bridal car to pull up. Well, someone's gone and parked there that's coming to the wedding. Now, they didn't know this is where the bride was going to park. There was nothing there to mark it. So I've stormed on. What the hell are you parking there for? Where's the bride going to park? And I've, jumped down their throat. And they've obviously moved the car, but obviously, I mean, the guy wasn't happy that, got angry in front of his girlfriend or wife or whoever he's with. And so look at that, from that experience. And I'm relaying that partly because, I'm who I am now, my ability to do the things that I do and not be stressed is not a product of what I grew up with. I mean, I grew up in an angry household. I mean, there's a lot of love there too.
Sure.
It depends on what you focus on. But certainly, I mean, and when I was growing up, we had, as teenagers, we literally had gang wars. Well, not like America. We didn't have guns or anything like that. But we got together.
No violence.
There was sticks. And there was punch-ons and things like that.
So it
And
hurts to get stabbed
they
and thumped
they
over
were
the head.
pre-planned, and they were very much yeah. Anyway, so. And I guess I'm relaying that is because it's something I know you teach, and you deal with people, and you've brought people
What,
through
gang warfare? I don't teach gang warfare.
that. No, how to get beyond that. Yeah, yeah. It's like this. Well, but from that perspective, from that protective mentality. So I guess my journey was probably more rougher to get to where I am today because I didn't have that guiding light. But I'm just for people out there that are listening that are going, okay, I react angrily in these situations where awareness is key. I mean, it took me a long time to be aware. And then two, for my ego to step aside and say, hey, hang on a minute, it's my issue that I need to resolve, not everybody else's. Do you want to talk us through your process of how you, because I understand that's what you do is part of your work is helping people go from, the type of person that I was many years ago to who I am now. Do you want to tell us about some of the steps that you take people through on that?
Yeah, you first have to want it. You first
Yeah.
have to want to change,
Mm.
right? I can't want it more for you, and nobody else can want it more for you. So you have to come to the realization that whatever you're doing isn't working.
Yeah.
And whatever you had that got you to where you are isn't necessarily what you need to get you where you want to go.
Mm.
So it's like, is it working for you anymore? Because so if you're constantly upset, constantly angry, pissing people off, losing jobs, and being in arguments all the time, or it doesn't have to be all those things in spades, but are you more stressed all the time, or are you enjoying your life? Are people around you happy? Not that you can make people happy, but let's face it, we do influence people. So if people, just like the House of a Thousand Mirrors, if no matter where you go, everybody's kind of angry, well, maybe they're not the ones angry. So you got to want it, is my point.
Yeah.
And if life isn't working for you on a consistent basis, then you have to look in the mirror and say, well, maybe I need to change. Maybe some things need to change.
Mm.
And then there's four areas that I take people through, and it starts with the mindset. So the mindset, there are three elements to the mindset. First one is the ethic of really dialing in with that ethic of life is precious, your life and the life of everybody else.
Mm.
But your life too, right? You're precious, and you only have one life to live. If you have more, maybe you do. I don't know, but might as well enjoy the one you're at.
Yeah, exactly.
But it's got to be balanced with other people too, because relationships are important. If you don't have good, I don't know anybody who doesn't have who isn't happy in life, who doesn't have a lot of good relationships. And the adverse is true too. I know miserable people usually have miserable relationships.
Yeah.
So relationships are huge. So back to the ethic of self and others, all others, most good, least harm for everybody.
Mm.
And then your identity, really dialing into your identity, that of a human being, that your worth, that your self-worth is your sanctity, right? The sanctity of human life, starting with yours, but not ending with yours. And also that identity of being a protector. And what does that mean? Being that lifeguard out there, not just the Olympic swimmer. And then finally, your attitude in the moment. Are you looking at the conflicts inside of you and around you as opportunities for growth and to figure out the problem, to get you the data that you need to live a better life and to resolve those issues more effectively? So that's step number one, right? Those three elements. So number one is mindset. You have to be in the proper mindset, and you have to want to be in a proper mindset. Otherwise, it's not going to work. Second one is awareness. Awareness of three things again. Awareness of what's going on inside of you, awareness of what's going on around you, the environments that you're in, and awareness of other individuals in your life, the positive, the negative, the good, the bad, the ugly, so to speak.
Yeah.
Third element is your ability to influence. And we all influence, right? We influence by our presence alone. We influence by nonverbal things, and we influence by verbal things. And that can be self-taught too, right? Meaning your presence is kind of your essence, the essence that you have developed over your lifetime. And The nonverbal are your emotions that you feel and how you interact with the world. And your verbal is, what kind of affirmations are you telling yourself?
Mm.
And what's your self-talk, and what's that coach in your head telling you?
Yeah.
So it's internal as well as external. And the third element, well, that is the third element, that's influence. The fourth element and the last one is action,
Yeah.
which goes to, we talked about a little bit earlier, your ability to avoid things that needn't be addressed, your
Mm.
ability to disengage or get out or prioritize, whatever you want to call it, prioritize what's worth fighting and what's
Mm.
worth engaging in. And then finally, your ability to engage. What do you do and how do you do it?
Yeah.
So understand your deal breakers. What are your deal breakers in life? What's
Yeah.
worth fighting for and what's worth letting go? And
Mm.
there's a great book, I think, Mark Manson, the subtle art of not giving an F. It's
Yeah, I've heard about that.
it's a
I
great
haven't
book,
read it
I
yet.
think, of,
Yeah.
there's only so many F's to give, and you better make sure that you give them for the right reasons, and you don't
Mm.
give F's about the things that don't matter. And really, you've got to know what that is for you, and in correlation with others too. It's not just a selfish thing. It's very much a collective thing, because, you can go through life with a lot of regrets, and the deepest regrets are the things that you can't take back ever.
Yeah.
Right? Like if you maybe got in an argument with someone, or someone
Mm.
passed away and you never had that resolved issue. Well, guess what? It's
Mm.
never going to be resolved other than just you.
Yeah.
And try to live a life to where it's self and others, all others, so you have less regrets. So those are the four kind of things, and then the three categories within those four things. But you first and foremost, you have to decide for you, is it working for you? Do you want to be better? Do you
Mm.
want to live a better life? Do you want to deal with and manage conflict inside of you and around you more effectively? And if you do, then there's some definite tools and things that you can start to learn and implement in your life, and develop new habits, because the decisions that you make today are going to create the life that you live tomorrow.
Yeah.
And we teach other people how to act in our presence and how to treat us. So if you don't like the way people are acting around you, and you don't like the way that people are treating you, you have to at some point look into the mirror and say, well, how am I contributing to this?
Mm. I love what you talked there about habits as well. I think we underestimate how much of what we do is a habit of what we've either been taught, or we've taught ourselves, or we've just done without really thinking about it, and we're reacting a certain way. Because it's interesting. I find that a lot of times we are doing things out of habit, and I was fortunate to have a trainer that once said to me about doing things just differently, even tying your shoes in a different order, to help break this way of you're just doing things constantly in the same way, to really get your mind to start thinking about alternative ways of approaching things. Um,
I have
so
one for you.
yeah, I'd love to.
So clap your hands for me.
Okay, now again, make me look like I'm
All right.
uncoordinated.
Clap your hands for me. So now everybody out there, clap your hands and just
Yeah,
do it naturally, right?
yeah,
So now what I want you to do is, because however which way you're doing, maybe you're left over right or right over left of your thumbs, right?
yeah.
So which thumb over are you?
Right over left.
You're right over left. Okay, now keep clapping your hands.
Yeah,
Now switch your thumbs and clap the other way.
yeah. That's awkward.
That's awkward, right?
Yeah,
Do it the opposite way again.
yeah.
Now switch it. It's hard, right?
I love that. That's awesome.
So something as simple as clapping your
Yeah.
hands, you have developed an unconscious habit. And when you change it, it
Mm,
feels awkward.
yeah.
So just think of all the other habits that we've picked up in our lifetime
Mm,
that would feel awkward if we did them any differently. But some of those habits are no longer serving us. And
yeah.
some of those habits are really harmful to us and others. So I agree. You need to continue to look at those habits and develop the new habits. And once again, I'll go back to what I said earlier of, you know, what's working for you and what's not. Are
Mm,
you as successful as you want to be? Are
mm,
you are your relationships as rich as you'd like for them to be? Is your life as inspiring as you'd like for it to be? Are those conflicts that you're in, do you find that they're the same conflicts all the time?
Yeah.
Or, so you start to be curious about your life inside of you and around you. And then you can start kind of amassing a new strategy to develop some new habits that might take you to the next level, right? So
Yeah.
maybe you're already happy with your life, but you want to be more successful, or you want deeper relationships, or whatever it is in life that you're looking for, maybe more financial success.
Mm.
So what habits have you established around your financial success or not? Or maybe your home life isn't quite as good as you would like for it to be. Maybe your relationship with your children isn't quite as good as you like it to be, or whatever it may be. It doesn't have to be these big knockdown, drag out. I'm a crack addict in a gang,
Yeah. Yeah.
killing people. It doesn't have to be that extreme. It can be
Mm.
small things that are very big and profound things. Maybe you're not happy with your career. Maybe you
Yeah.
want to shift gears into your career, but you just don't. For some reason, you just can't seem to do that. So what habits do you have to change that will help to facilitate the changes that are necessary to get you to that next level, to that next spot?
I love that.
And the same thing holds true with businesses, right, and
Yeah.
organizations and companies. So collectively, that culture has developed certain habits too. And if you want to
Mm.
get to the next level of your business, or maybe you're experiencing some challenges and some difficulties. Well, what habits culturally in your corporation or your business have you established that need to change in order to, either mend those differences or to get to the next level of your profitability or whatever you're looking for to achieve in your business world?
Yeah, I love that. I mean, I certainly relate to the business side of things because I mean that's where I work, and implementing change in business. I find it's easy. It's just finding the right triggers, and it happens really quickly. And I love what you were talking about there about are you and I made some notes. I've got to find sort of scribbled a lot of notes while you were talking because you had so much valuable. I'm going to have to go back and listen to this part again. There was so much
Slow it
valuable
down.
information there. But it was fascinating when you're talking about the habits, and what triggered me was I had a friend, and being in that situation where they weren't really happy with their job. Actually, they hated it. It was a really toxic environment, and they wanted to get a new job. And it was like, well, just apply for a new job. And I literally listened to. I think it was at least 2 years, if not 2.5 years, where they just constantly telling me about how this job sucked. They
Right.
hated it. They're always getting all, and it was really bad from what they were telling me about this environment. And I was saying, just why don't you, just apply for a new job? You're highly skilled, you're talented, and just apply
Right.
for a new job. Never did. Never. It was just that habit of not wanting to take that step. And then finally, I think got to a point where it was almost they were pushed out. There was an email that was sent around saying that they'd quit when they hadn't, and I was like, "Well, that's a big sign."
Well,
Um,
there's a great example, right?
yeah.
So
And
it's
then,
almost, sometimes people like to be passive aggressive. They don't want to take the bull by the horns by that. So what they do is they create a circumstance to where others kind of, they get what they want, but not in the way that they want it. So they can
mm,
say, oh well, they fired me, or whatever it might be. Look at a relationship, right? So some
yeah,
people want to get out of a relationship rather than just saying, hey, listen, darling, this isn't working out for me. You're a
yeah,
great person, but we need to go our separate ways because of whatever reasons. What sometimes people start, they start making situations where they fight all the time, or this passive aggressive behavior to where it blows up in a
yeah,
big, in a
yeah,
big fight, and that way they never really had to say what they probably should have said in the first place. So
yeah. Yeah, well,
it's
and it's interesting how you have that, and I have some relationship experiences similar to that. But just finishing off on that, my friend of mine who spent 2 years complaining about this job, or at least 2 years, 2 years in this, and not only that, was physically upset and emotionally upset for this period of time. Then this circumstance had where it kind of blew up, and it's like, okay, then. They went out and they actually applied for a number of jobs. They got offers because that's what I was telling them. That you're in today's world, we live in an employee shortage environment.
right.
You're really diligent and hard worker. You're employable. Just go out and put applications out. You'll get inundated. So they never did. But then when they were in that situation where they must do that, they put it out there. and they got all these positive responses, ended up in a great work environment, getting paid $40,000 more.
Oh
Um,
my God.
it's like, there's 80 grand you just lost because you didn't take that step 2 years ago. Um,
Seriously, right?
yeah, and it was just really fascinating about that experience. But like you're saying, a lot of people we get in that habit of going through and just doing that and not having that conversation because, as you say, the protector mentality comes from yourself first, protecting yourself and having the confidence to do what's right for you. Um, so it's just, yeah, I love that from that
And
experience.
having the courage, right? The courage that, again, you can persevere, but not just persevere, because we're not talking just survival here.
Yeah.
You know, when I
I
go out
question
and I
that
work,
about courage and perseverance. I just wonder whether it's, well, it is courage, I guess, because I mean, fear is overcoming the fear, but is it a real fear? And maybe I
right?
put it down to naivety because I just do stuff without really thinking about it. And I facetiously joke that, because I'm a Leo, I'm a cat, and I see a shiny thing and I jump over there. Sometimes it's fire, and I go, "Hang on a minute, maybe I got to get out." But
Maybe not. Well, it's
but
about balance too. I mean, you need to have the balance.
yeah,
And I think there's some people that are gung ho,
yeah,
and some people are gun shy, right? And the
yeah,
gun shy people need to stoke their fires, or need to have a mentor or experience or something to stoke
mm,
their fires. And the gung ho people need to cool their jets a little bit, to find the balance. And it doesn't have to be, you could be gung ho in certain things in your life and gun shy in other things. I think we
mm.
have a tendency to have a personality type, but I know people who are really like assertive in certain ways, but in other ways, it's like, hey, at work, you're really assertive and you're go getter, but your personal life, you're complaining that you don't have anybody in your life, but you don't go out to like meet anybody. So, it's like you're gung ho here, but you're gun shy there.
Is it a case
Uh,
of, because you come back to your first principle is knowing what you want? I'm paraphrasing a little bit, but you said that first point was, I wrote it down, but it was essentially knowing what you want, whether you want this to continue anymore, and being really committed to that. Because I think from, I look at it from my perspective and going, well, if I know what I want about, if I want this, nothing's going to get in my way. I want it, and I'm going to have it, and I'm going to do whatever it takes, within the law, obviously. But I mean, I'm speaking, to the standard of these principles. I'm not going to, step on somebody to get what I want, and I'll find a way of making it happen within what are the acceptable principles for me. But I'm not going to give up on that because I want it, and I'm just going to do it, because I think what I'm doing is helpful to other people anyway. Does it come down to that, to be really committed to what you want? Do you think that drives people to overcome that fear?
yeah, if you just be careful that what they say, success is getting what you want, and happiness is wanting what you get. Uh,
Yeah.
So you've got to be mindful of what you want, and also, I know some people are very goal oriented,
Mm,
and it seems like, well, they know what they want, they know how to get it, but to be honest, some of those people, they like the process of getting versus
mm,
the process of having. They like the achievement process. So
mm.
what happens is they're always challenging themselves in different ways, and some of them don't really know what they want. They just know they like the feeling of achievement.
Yeah, that's what I'm
Uh,
getting to. Is it about clarifying what it is that they want as opposed to this feeling?
Right. And you've got to really, sometimes you have to dig for that, because
Yeah,
there are the reasons, and then there are the reasons underneath the reasons. And the
yeah.
same thing goes with conflict, right? So
Mm,
usually there's an overt reason. For instance, let's say you get in an argument with your wife
mm.
about I don't know, you didn't pick up your laundry, right? Or
What's
you didn't put
laundry?
the toilet seat down. You didn't put the cap back on the toothpaste. You
Yeah,
didn't you didn't rearrange the refrigerator.
yeah.
And then you find out later it really wasn't about that.
Mm,
It was about some underlying, well, she didn't feel like you're, pulling her weight around the house, or she felt like she was not being, respected, or,
yeah,
usually there's the reason, and then there's the real reason underneath. Same
yeah,
thing, keep them like business, right?
yeah,
So what's one of the largest objections that you usually get, in sales, is the price objection.
yeah.
And oftentimes it's not really the price, it's the perceived value. there's a lot of other things that are underneath that.
Yeah.
So, but it's just easier to go, oh, you're too expensive. I got two other bids that outbid you, and I'm going to go with one of those. And it's like, well, wait a minute.
Yeah.
So the salesperson who just takes it for face value and goes, oh, okay, and sulks off to the next person,
Yeah.
they're really, they need to be more of a detective, put
Mm.
their put their Sherlock Holmes hat on,
Yeah.
and go and figure it out. So, like I teach folks what's called the 4 C's. One is, what's the current situation? So, what's
Yeah.
going on right now?
Mm.
What are the challenges that you are facing? What's the
Mm.
challenge that you're facing? What would you change if you had the capacity to?
Yeah.
Right. So, what would you change when, if you could, what would you change? And then what's the next step?
Mm.
What is the next step that you need to do to change that situation? So,
Yeah.
when you approach a situation, because usually
Mm.
there's something there that needs to be altered
Yeah.
in order for you to get what you want and to be successful.
Yeah. Yeah, they're
Oh,
good
but
questions to ask, those 4 Cs. Um, I mean, something that stood out when you just said it in part of that conversation was you mentioned about happiness, which was, you said it was happiness is, you want, what was the quote? You want what
get
you,
what you success is wanting what you get, or success is getting what you want. Happiness is wanting what you get.
yeah. And because I've been playing with this happiness side of things for some time now. And for me, I don't have bad days ever now. Every day is a great day. Like it's super great day. I go to bed feeling that I've done, and I know. Then there's a number of factors that contribute to that. I mentioned before, I have a time management program, and I implement that makes it sets up to have a great day. So I follow that. But one of the things where that came from, and because I was looking at a lot of this, and we know dopamine, serotonin are the happy drugs, and when that produces in your body, the element to that which is not widely known is that your body will start producing dopamine merely thinking a happy thought.
Hmm.
So you will immediately, if you
Which is a
think a
habit.
happy, it just well exactly. As soon as you start to think a happy thought, your body will produce dopamine. And I was relaying that back because I don't think they knew this back then. And I quote movies. I don't watch a lot of movies, but I do quote them a little bit. But there was a movie released in 1937. It was the first feature length animated movie, Snow White.
So
And
what?
in
Yeah.
that movie, she sings Whistle While You Work. Now, I don't think they understood dopamine back then and its effect on its body. But when we look at these principles, we know that, in that attitude, having that attitude makes a difference. And quoting another movie, Mary Poppins, every job that must be done, there's an element of fun. Find this fun and snap, the job's a game. And I link that to, I remember when I was thinking about it, there was a time where I wasn't, early on, I said I went to from didn't finish school, went to the army, left the army, and so in between getting studying in university, I did some menial jobs. And one of these places I was working, I went in to do some admin work, and it was sorting out spreadsheets, and it was like thousands, tens of thousands of lines in a spreadsheet. When they dumped it out, the columns weren't aligned, so they needed that all aligned. My job was to align that. And well, it wasn't just mine. There was a lot of people. I think there was about 5 people working on this. It was just this massive thing, and so I don't think you could find a more tedious task to do. Although I did work in a bolt factory once, packing bolts into a box, so that's pretty tedious too. But I remember with this spreadsheet, I made it a game of trying to work out how could I, sort things so that I could shift it across much easier and quicker while maintaining that order. And I made it. And so I did this for 2 weeks and I actually enjoyed it. And I didn't realize at the time, but now that now that I thought back about that, I realized that because I made it a game, I was the video game mentality. I was producing dopamine, so I was having fun doing that. And so I wonder about that from that perspective too, when we're talking about happiness. And you mentioned about exactly that happiness. What was the happiness is in enjoying what you've got. And is it a case of from that perspective, just creating that? You mentioned habit again of creating that habit, because I know if that's my life. I've set up my day. Every day I set up to follow the time management program that I have, to do the tasks. At the end of the day, I congratulate myself on all the things that I've accomplished. I don't worry about the stuff that I didn't do. I only focus on what I did do and say, isn't that awesome that I did that? I'm producing dopamine. I feel fantastic every day. Is that, from that perspective, from this life, and I know you'll have a Zen quote in here to add to that, can we make that focus, and then we create that happiness, which I'm getting to the point of, because I believe that's part of the reason I project out into the world, this feeling of confidence, a feeling of happiness, and I'm in that hall of 1,000 mirrors with the happy dogs going, hey, here you are. Is it as simple as that?
It's as simple. It doesn't mean it's easy.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. Simple doesn't mean it's easy. And it is a habit. So I do have a story for you, more than a quote, a story. It's the Mason of Notre Dame, right? So a lot of what we're talking about is about perspective.
Yeah.
And perspective, everything really flows back to the life value again, if you can connect the dots. Now, the gamification process that you went through to amuse yourself at your job is good. It's one way of doing it. But I've got something that's even better for you.
Cool.
So they're not mutually exclusive. You can do both.
No. So I'll probably integrate and create something even better.
Yeah. So the Mason of Notre Dame is like this. So let's say Bob. Bob is the foreman on the quarry, the stone quarry that was building all the blocks to build. I'm going to
interrupt you, sorry, because it's just funny you chose the name Bob, because I had an experience with a Bob who was a real. Anyway, it's just funny that you chose the name Bob. There's another story there, but anyway.
Yeah, another story, right? Just the luck of the draw. So Bob is the foreman on the quarry for to build Notre Dame, and he goes. Every week he goes out to kind of check on the guys to see if they need anything, and make sure everybody's slamming away at the stones like they're supposed to. So he goes up to the first guy and he's like, "Hey, Bill, what's going on? How's your day going?" And Bill's like, "Holy cow, it's a hot day. I'm out here. I've been working all day in the quarry. I'm getting old. These things are heavy. I'm not even going to be around for this building to be built. It's going to take generations, and I'm not even going to see it. But, so my day is kind of crappy, to be honest with you. I'm hot, I'm thirsty, I'm tired, and I'm old." So good old Bob, he kind of knows Bill already. He's like, "Okay, Bill, well, I'll get you some water, and, just keep going. If you have any other, something comes up, let me know. But, just hang in there, brother. Keep going." And so Bob goes to the next guy. So over here you got John. John's hammering away at the rocks and the stones, making the bricks for Notre Dame, and he says, "Hey, what's going on? How's your day going, John? Is there anything I can do for you? Need some water or something?" And John's like, "No, my day's going pretty good. I've got a steady job. Yeah, it's hard work, but I build up muscle when I do it. And this thing's never going to be built in my lifetime, which means job security. It means my kids are going to have work too, because I'm training them to be the next stonemason here. So it's hard work, but I'm good. So just give me some water. I'll be good to go." So good old Bob does. He gives him some water, moves on to the next one. And the last guy, his name's Tom, and Tom's like whistling when he works, and he's like jamming. He's just jiving on this stuff, and he's working his little butt off, sweating up the storm because it's like 80 degrees out, and he is very motivated. So Bob goes, "Hey, Tom, how's it going today? And, do you need anything? Can I help you?" And Tom's like, "Man, this is a friggin' awesome day. Yeah, you can get me some more stone so I can continue to cut even more, because, we're building this great edifice that is going to inspire generations of people to come. And, I'm never going to see this built in my lifetime, but I know that I'm building the foundation that everybody else is going to build their stuff on. So I need to do a good job to inspire generations coming, before me." So each one of these guys are doing the same exact job.
Yeah.
But how they view it is very, very different, right?
Yeah.
The first guy's viewing it from himself, that it's just hard work and the toil and tribulations of life.
Mm.
that it's a chore because he needs a job, he needs to keep a roof over his head. So he begrudgingly, comes in every day and does his work, does exactly what's necessary of him, but no more.
Mm.
Guy number two sees self and others. He sees himself and what it's doing for his family and his kids and his grandkids and how it provides for them.
Mm.
And Tom, the third guy, sees self, others, and all others, and the sanctity of life, and not just survival, but in this idea of fulfillment and much, much bigger picture. So they all do the same job. However, their enjoyment and fulfillment and happiness of that job is very different by the three different layers that they perceive and they focus on with that job.
Yeah, I love that. That's awesome. It seems to be from that story that happiness is not just on yourself. Well, focusing on yourself generally doesn't work very well, but having that, taking it through to Tom, where he's focused on not just himself, not just his family, but the greater world, and looking after, having a purpose of helping the world be a better place, puts that person in a mindset of just relishing and enjoying. That's so powerful. That's
And
really,
even on a bad day with a vision like that, still not that bad of a day.
yeah, that's amazing.
So
I mean, and I guess we've really come full circle as well from where we started. This is that protector mentality, isn't it? It's having that bigger vision for life, that it's more than yourself, it's more than your family, it's for life as a whole, by the sounds of it.
yeah, it is. We have come full circle in many good ways, I think. So if you want to take that Notre Dame story and put it into conflict management context, if you reach a discord with someone, if you can see them as being a human being, just like you, hurt just like you, want just like you, a family just like you, and you can connect on the things that you have in common, and then help direct them to that bigger story. They don't even have to understand it or agree with it, but if you can help to identify with them, meet them where they're at, share in their story and their trials and tribulations a little bit, listen to them empathetically, and then to help guide them and to connect, you're going to have a much easier time getting through that conflict. Now, it doesn't mean it's always going to work out. Doesn't mean it's always going to work out well. Doesn't mean you're going to get a raise at work. It doesn't mean a lot of things. But my guess is you'll live a bit of a better life, and you'll be able to navigate conflicts more effectively, probably have less of them, because you come into that house of 1,000 mirrors, like with your attitude, that happy to see everybody and trying to figure out the problems and looking at life through those glasses of positivity. You're going to be in a much, much better place to live a better life, make more income, be a better person, have a more fulfilling, happy legacy.
Love that. Craig, we've been, I haven't been paying attention to the clock, but we've been talking for a while now. I just
We've
looked
been talking for a while, brother.
this is awesome. I just looked at that and it's like, wow. I've got a magpie on the back porch here yelling at me, wants some food. But Craig, that I love that takeaway, that this, having that bigger picture and that protector mentality. And I think from what you said too, maybe you don't get that raise, but it's certainly puts you in a position where you're going to be better off than if you're doing the opposite. I would say
You probably will get it, but there's no guarantees. But you'll be better off either way.
Yeah, exactly. You're going to be better off by approaching that attitude. Craig, it's always fun chatting with you. It's just so exciting. So much great value. We're going to put your details in the show notes as well, so that people can reach out to you for the things that you do. And I look forward to catching up again in the future.
That'd be great. Thanks for having me on your show again. Awesome talking with you. I really appreciate the time. And to all your listeners out there, thank you so much for sharing with us. And in the meantime, if I can be of any service to anybody, let me know. And hopefully we'll talk to you soon again.
Thank you for being part of the Share.Care community and helping people around the world prosper. You're creating a bigger pie for everyone to share. The more people contributing to the world being a better place, the better the world becomes. for others, and for you.